sunny morning. Lovely. Not for us though, is it? What is it with noisy motorbikes and me always trying to film? Well, I don't know what it is about this street. I can't wait to bloody move. As you can see, the car is painted. Dun, 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 dun. It's now in its new colour. So it's had primer and it's had 3 top coat. I would love to say the paint is immaculate, but it isn't. It has a fair amount of orange peel in places, as I'll show you. I'll try and get on the camera as best I can. You can normally tell in the reflection. So you see the reflection of the cross beams here in the roof. If I take you on down, and you can see it's anything but mirror straight. There is, yeah, artifacts in it. Don't get me wrong, from a distance, from like, 5 feet away, wherever I'm here, it looks really nice. It's nice, it's shiny, it's all that good stuff. But it's not perfect up close. And I've actually had to work at it to get it to this state now. This is after cutting and polishing. So the problem I've got in here, let me just turn you around. So the problem we've got in here, obviously it's not an ideal spray booth. You want a sterile environment, plastic sheets, good lighting all round. You need to be able to fully get around the car, a good sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 meters around the car. Just so you're not touching the paintwork, running your air hose anywhere near the paintwork, and you've got room to stand back and look at it. You want good extraction, obviously when you're using paint, good PPE, and you need a good temperature control. And this is the main problem I've got, is that it's now 2nd week of October. Whilst we are in one of the warmer parts of the UK down in the southwest, it is still quite cold. It's probably about 18 degrees out here this morning, and it's just too cold for spraying. Quite simply, spraying you want to be more like 30 degrees, so the paint goes on nice and wet, and it stays nice and wet when it's on the car. And obviously, when the paint cures in that heat, it cures and hardens properly. Hardening paint in this sort of temperature takes maybe a week, to cure through properly. It'll be touch dry, don't get me wrong, in an hour or so, but for it to cure out properly, yeah, it takes days. So it's very difficult. It was always going to be difficult for me to do a good spray finish. Anyone who was asking about when I'm getting the car paint, and I said, I'm spraying it myself, they were like, oh, are you really? I'm like, yeah, I don't have any choice. The car isn't roadworthy. It's not taxed, insured or anything. I can't just drive it down to someone else's house or set up a spray booth outside. I've got neighbours on both sides. It's very, very, very difficult. So I've had to do the best I can. And the result was, obviously, it came out a little bit orange peely. I was pretty much expecting. Ironically, the first coat I did on top of the primer actually came out lovely. It came out really wet, mirror finish, and I thought, oh man, this is going to look good. I've surprised myself. I've never sprayed before. This actually looks really good. And then when I put the second and third coats on and came back, it just looked matte, cloudy, orange peely. It was just, it was just horrible. So my mission now, so I've got 2 choices basically. I can either spray over it again, which I have got enough paint left to spray it, but of course the problem you're going to get is if you're spraying on top of orange peel, the chances of you getting it on top of that again is very high, and at that point then I've used all my paint, which means I then got to go and buy another 100 quid's worth of paint, which I don't really want to do. So the other option is obviously you cut the paint back. So when I've got 3 layers of top coat on, I know that I've got enough depth in the paint I can go down a little bit. So what I've started with is 1500 wet and dry, getting it super wet and just doing it by hand. Because the car is all curves, I don't want to use a block, so I'm just doing it by hand. So far I've only done the boot, the trunk, and it's come out quite nice. Other than obviously there's still the orange peel in the paint to a certain extent, it's actually come out much better than it was. So that's what I'm going to do. Wet and dry 1500, and then I'm using the machine polisher. So I've got oh no, sorry, it's 1200 wet and dry. But this is, you know, perfectly good to get a nice flat. People do say you get up to 1,500, then up to 2 grand. You know, in my experience, don't really need it. 1,200 seems to be absolutely fine. Then I've got 3 pads from my polisher. So I've got my abrasive pad, I've got my middle pad, and I've got my soft pad, which is the one that's on it. I borrowed this from a friend, Clark rotary polisher. Pretty straightforward. It's like an angle grinder basically, but it's just got a Velcro pad on the head. And we're using some G3 cutting compound, and then finally some Halfer's own brand car polish, just for the very final polish. So essentially what we're doing is going in with the wet and dry first of all, giving it a really good going over. Obviously it takes time. You got to, you know, if you've ever done any sanding or wet and dry sanding, you know it takes time. You got to go over the area with your, keep it nice and wet. Use your sandpaper, go over the entire area. This cuts back down through the top layer, the peaks, if you like. If you imagine orange peel as being a series of peaks, you're sanding down through those peaks to try and get to the bottom, and you're hoping that by the time you get to the bottom, you're not hitting the primer. So this is why I've left it a little bit orange peely. I don't want to cut down too far and then find I hit the primer. So I'd rather have a, you know, an imperfect paint job that looks okay from a distance. Again, this is an amateur effort, I hasten to add, than cut all the way down and have to respray the whole thing again. So that's where we are. So yeah, start with your wet and dry. Go mad on it. Always use it wet. Don't ever use it dry. Use it wet and keep it wet as hell. As soon as the paper starts grabbing, get it wet. Bucket of water down there. Just keep slapping the water all over it and going around it. Once that's done, we then go to the abrasive head with some G3 compound. Get your cutting compound, snail it all over the boot, rub it in with the head of the polisher, and get the polisher, get on it, and work your way up it in lines. At least this is how I'm doing it. I'm not saying this is the way to do it, this is how I'm doing it. And I did that twice. So I wet sanded it, and then I cut polished it. And then I thought I'd give it one more go with the wet sands just to see how it came out. So I went back, wet sanded it again, and then machine polished it again. So in future I'll wet sand it twice. Then obviously you go to the middle head, same thing, cutting compound, go with the middle abrasive, and then finally what I'm doing is going with the soft foam head with the car polish, just to bring it up to a nice shine. And to be fair, it has come up to a nice shine, and it's super, super slick. It really is, you know, it does feel very, very soft. So that's one of the panels we've done. If I take you around and show you the bonnet, the hood, you can see just how bad it is. Which is thoroughly annoying. So if I show you on the top of the arches there, you can see it's more like satin. It hasn't come out gloss. It's dropped to a satin sort of colour. It looks very glossy when I was spraying it, don't get me wrong. When I was spraying it, it was going on lovely and wet, and I thought, oh man, this is going to look lovely. And then as it dried and I came back an hour later, it looked like that, and I was a bit like, oh. But, you know, this does happen. Again, when you're spraying, you're either spraying too dry, so you're not getting enough paint out of the gun, or you're just spraying too cold, and then you're just not getting the lacquer just isn't flattening out with the heat as it hits the panel. So anyway, to come back to this satin finish. The finish is okay, don't get me wrong, but it's satin. You can see here where I've tried polishing it a little bit already, just with a machine polisher, just to see if I could get away without having to wet sand the entire car. And no, I do need to wet sand the entire car. So yeah, wet sand. We'll go through this layer on top, see if I can get you in there really close so you can see the texture in the paint. See that? It's horrific. Of course, I could have... Sorry, I'm going to turn you around again. Of course, I could have done all this off camera. I could have just wet sanded this off camera, polished it up, rolled it outside and gone, ta-da, I've painted it. Doesn't it look amazing? Aren't I good? But I don't want to do that. There is enough falsity, is that even a right word, in the world today. People trying to be people they aren't, trying to look the way they don't. Trying to claim things they haven't achieved. I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. I would rather show you at warts and all and say, look, this is the paint job, I buggered it up. Simple as that. But now I'm going to try and remedy it, and maybe we can all learn something. I'd rather do that than pretend I did it immaculately and everything's perfect. If you've seen any of my other videos, you know it isn't perfect. Nothing I do is perfect. I'm not a perfectionist. I don't have the money or the time to be a perfectionist, and this is my first project. So if I did another one, I would do it differently, no doubt. You know, I've learned a lot from this. So I'd rather show you it, warts and all, as they say, and then deal with it and see how it comes out. So no, it isn't perfect. But yeah, so we've done the boot already. So the next job now is to do the same thing on the bonnet, wet sand the shit out of it, machine polish it up through the grades, and see if we can get rid of the orange peel and get a nice, you know, glossy finish on the bonnet. I've got a feeling, fingers crossed, the bonnet is going to come out better than the boot, because this paint seems a bit flatter. I think once I cut down through the top layer of orange peel on this, it's actually going to come out a bit nicer. Right, enough of me yabbering, let's get on with it.
Okay, so an hour later, and we have wet sanded this half of the bonnet. Now with the light in here it's very difficult to see, but you can see the right half of the bonnet there has some reflectivity, whereas the left half has almost none. The sanding process really mats this side out. I mean, to be fair, it's using a 1200, as you can see it's actually still got a reasonable shine to it. It's very difficult to tell in this light. But anyway, all you need to know is I'll spend the last hour wet sanding that half of the bonnet, not this. So after the wet sand, now we've got to polish it. So again, we're going to use our abrasive pad and our G3 polishing compound. And all we're going to do is grab a bit of this. If it wants to come out. Get a little trickle like that. And then with the head of our disc, just going to grab that and just spread it around. Of course, the good thing with working on paintwork you don't like is that you can't really bugger it up, because you didn't like it in the first place. Right, I haven't got enough arms to film this at the same time, so I'm going to give this a quick whiz back. Bear with me. Okay, and that's after a machine polish. So I tend to do 2 passes. I go up it first of all in a snake pattern like that, and then I come back down on that line where it meets the wing, and then I start again. And then finally give it a quick buff off with a microfiber cloth. So again, I appreciate very difficult to tell in this light, but this is the side we polished and that's the side we haven't polished. I don't know how well the difference is going to come out on camera. Unpolished and polished, and you can see how unstraight, if that's even a word, my panel is. Look at the reflections. Don't ever come to me for bodywork, you'll be very disappointed. But it is nice and shiny, and a lot of the orange peel has gone out of it. There is still some in it. Again, difficult to get on camera. The camera makes it look better than it actually is, to be fair. But it's an obscene amount of work, it really is. And that is an hour just doing that half, going at it hammer and tongs, non-stop, scrub, 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 forwards and backwards for an hour with a bucket of water and some 1200 wet and dry in there. As I say, it's an obscene amount of work. So ideally what you want, turn me around. So what you want is to get it right first time. If you get it right with the paint, then you haven't got to do this. If you can get a nice wet coat on and your paint comes out gleaming, then fair play to you. You save yourself a lot of hours and a lot of shoulder pain by not having to wet sand the entire car by hand. And this is a small car. Imagine if you were doing a big car. Imagine if you were doing a Cadillac or something like that. It would be obscene. But you know, for the home sprayer like me, you know, it's the best I can get, really. A lot of guides will say you should really wet sand in between every single coat. So you do your primer, and then obviously cut that back, wet sand it back, and then get your first top coat on, same thing, let that go off, wet sand it back, and then 2 or 3 layers of top coat, however many layers of paint you're doing. And that way you're going to reduce the amount of you know, fish eyeing or orange peel you get, because you're getting each layer nice and flat. So as long as your next layer goes on nice and flat, you're going to save yourself a lot of work. But like I say, there we go. I'm tied to what facilities I have. This is the facility I have, so I have to make the best of it. I can either moan about it, or take it to a garage, or take it to an actual spray shop and get it sprayed. Get them to do the body work, they'll get it perfectly straight, they'll spray it for me, no problem at all. It's also going to cost me about £3 grand. You know, when you're paying £1 grand for the car, I'm not about to pay £3 someone to do the bodywork for me. So do it myself. It isn't perfect. I know it's not perfect. I know I keep saying this, and I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record saying it's not perfect. But you know, it's not perfect. It's far from perfect, to be honest. But it's my work. So at the end of the day, when the car is finished and it rolls out, and people go, "Oh, paintwork's a little bit," I'll go, "Yeah, I did it." You know, I'm not a painter by trade. I'm not a bodyman by trade. I'm not a mechanic by trade. I'm just having a go and seeing the best I can do. So that's what I'm all about. But it's shiny, it's the right colour, and again, the camera's very kind. The camera makes it look much better than it actually is. I'll show it again in daylight. It's Thursday today, so I'm going in now. I've had enough for one day. It's 6:30. I've been working all day, sanding, and now I come back and I have to do more sanding. But again, my choice. So I'm going to leave it for today. I'll come back tomorrow after work and I'll do this half of the bonnet, same way I've done this half. And then any free time I've got this weekend, I'll then start on the wings and the rear wings. How far down the wings I'm going to go, I don't know. I mean, to be fair, I'll probably have to go all the way down. I'm not going to do the bottom of the light clusters. I'm not going to do down around the underside of the sill, because again, you're not really going to see it. I'll have to do around the windscreen surround, because obviously you are going to see that. Yeah, so here we go. Keep sanding, keep polishing, and then finally get this paintwork saga put to bed. It seems to be a never-ending stream of sagas with this car. I'm sure it's the same with any restoration. You know, first of all it was the chassis, trying to get the chassis right, doing all the welding on that, cutting out rust, welding replacement panels. And then it's the body, same thing, filling, sanding, welding, getting it straight. And these seem to be these big steps, you know. Once you get the chassis done, it's like this big box ticked in your mind. The chassis is done now, I can start bolting stuff back on again, all the bits I've refurbed. And the same with the body. Once the body's on, the body's straight, or at least as straight as I've got it. It's a nice feeling, you know, it's all welded up, there's no more rust, and you think, okay, the body's sound now, that's cool, I can get the body bolted back down, now I can start on the interior. And obviously the paintwork is a huge step. Annoyingly, the paintwork's the only thing that people really see. No one's ever going to really see the chassis, all the work I've put into that, all the components I've been through and restored one at a time, all the previous videos. No one's ever really going to see that, but they are going to see the paint. It's the only thing they're going to see, and it's the bit I've probably done the worst on, so, you know, what can you do? Keep going. The British spirit of the Blitz and all that, just keep stiff upper lip, keep chiseling away, keep going. Nothing lasts forever, so keep going. As Churchill once said, if you're going through hell, keep going. Okay, so that's after a cut and polish. So again, the 1200 finishing with the abrasive disc. We haven't done the final polishing on it yet. If you get down close, again, I don't know how well you better see it on the camera. Just see there's some dry spots there. Like, just in there. That's obviously what you get when you cut down through your orange peel layer and get down to the layer beneath. But like I say, it's only had one polish so far with the abrasive polisher, so we'll start to work our way back up through the discs, finishing with a soft pad and a normal car polish, and hopefully we should be able to get that nice and shiny. Okay, so we've now wet sanded the entire car, polished the boot lid, but I haven't polished the panel there where the fuel filler cap is, and you can see the difference between the two. One's very matte, one's very glossy, and if we get in close to it, you can probably see the texture, and you can see the sort of where we've cut down through the orange peel. So that still needs to be polished, the wings need to be polished, and that's about it really. and then we can sort of call this paintwork done, at least to the best of my ability. As I've said many times, it's not perfect, but it's good enough for me, and I think it's pretty good for a first attempt as well, if I do say so myself. So let's get the doors open, roll it outside a little bit, grab our polishing compound, and let's get cracking, because I want to get this done today. Gonna obviously need to sort the bumpers and everything out and the grill on. They're just put on roughly in situ. Looks alright, doesn't it? For a beginner effort. I don't think that's too bad. That's all now wet sanded, cut back, hand polished. For the most part, I think it's alright. There's a few flaws in it. A couple of runs still to sort out, but on the whole, not too bad.